vengeance!
Hit the pace car! What for? Because you hit every other damn thing out there. I want you to be perfect.
When I'm driving, I got a guy on the radio who talks to me. It's him. He talks to me.
Well, I wanna be a race car driver. Pretty girls eating from my hand, yeah. Wanna live a life of fun and danger. No sweater working for the man, alright. Well, hey. Well, I wanna be a firefighter. Cool-headed when the heat is on, yeah. Save my baby from the burning building. Take all the work sprinklers on, alright. Well, alright.
No, he didn't slam you, he didn't bump you, he didn't nudge you. He rubbed you. And rubbing, son, is racing.
Hey race fans, welcome to the Hoobazoo Radio Network and welcome to Drafting the Circuits. My name is Frank Santoroski. I'll be your host for the next hour as we talk about all the topics racing from this week and preview next week for you. Before we get into discussion, let me introduce you to the panel tonight. With me, as always, Mr. Gray Warren from Richard Childress Racing. I have Richard Youden, our Formula One analyst, Seth Eggert, and Christopher Deharde, both from Motorsports Tribune, in the house as well. How is everybody tonight?
Doing good.
All right, so
Fantastic.
so we're coming off a weekend where we had the Indy cars at Gateway. Formula One was back in action in Spa. The NASCAR Cup boys had the weekend off, but the truck guys were up there in Canada at Mosport Canadian Tire Motorsports Park, and Road Atlanta hosted the Xfinity cars. So full weekend of racing all around. Our winners were Sebastian Vettel in Formula One. Will Power takes the win at Gateway, and everybody named Justin won races in Xfinity and trucks. That would be Justin Haley in the Truck Series and Justin Allgaier in Xfinity. So, but Richard, Formula One has been off for a couple weeks, and we've been pushing your segment to the end of the show. But now, Formula One back in action on one of the longest track they race on, one of the most beautiful facilities in the world, the classic racetrack in Spa. That being said, so we had Vettel take the win, and we saw a pretty good test of the strength of the Halo. So, Richard, why don't you take us through it a little bit?
Yeah, it was great to be back after the summer break. Everybody come back refreshed and raring to go. One of the interesting things I think coming out of Spa was probably the first time in about 4 or 5 races you actually saw the fastest car win the race. I think it was maybe, thinking off the top of my head, probably back to France was the last time that genuinely the fastest car won the race. So get a bit of sense back into the racing for a change. Ferrari was dominant all weekend. Vettel, Raikkonen were leading all the practice sessions, I believe, led Q1 and Q2. McLaren were nowhere. Both of the McLaren cars, I believe, were knocked out in Q3, along with both of the Williams cars. So both of the two of the bigger names in the sport there were struggling, as unfortunately we've seen a lot of the last few years. But coming into Q3, typically for Spa, it started to rain in the middle of that final 10-minute segment, and it really caught Ferrari out. They struggled in the wet, as they saw in Hungary. The previous race. In qualifying in the rain, those Ferraris just don't get hooked up in the same way that the Mercedes do, and Hamilton on a drying track, admittedly, was able to take pole ahead of the rival Vettel. So going into the race, Spa's notorious for first lap incidents. You go back to 98 in the rain, where probably a dozen cars got taken out on the run between La Source and Eau Rouge. And then a few years ago, you saw Romain Grosjean barrel rolling through the cars ahead of him as they went into that first corner hairpin. And this weekend, we saw something very, very similar there with Nico Hülkenberg seeming to forget his braking point and slamming to the back of Fernando Alonso, who again was caught up in the incident similar to what he was with Grosjean those years ago. And that forced Alonso over Charles Leclerc, and all 3 of those cars retired pretty much on the spot. But the one good thing that came out of that, as you mentioned, was the Halo in Formula One. Anyway, got its real first test in, I believe it was Barcelona early in the year. A couple of Formula 2 cars, the feeder series to Formula 1, they climbed over each other, and there was some damage, not damage to the Halo, but markings on the Halo. So it had already been given a bit of a run out in Formula 2, but to see that in Formula 1 and the apparent damage caused to Charles Leclerc's Halo was pretty significant. There was, it took an impact. And it did its job. The driver was okay. He got out of the car, walked away without any major issue. So, for all those doubters that questioned Halo's, real sort of, purpose there, how it was an ugly and an eyesore. Well, you know what? I don't think Charles Leclerc is going to be considering that an eyesore right now. I don't know if it would have hit him, but hey, it didn't, and that's the main thing.
That is the main thing, yeah. And as far as the damage to the Halo, if you look at it, it's all superficial. The whole, the structure and the shape of it is still as sound as when they put it on. It didn't bend in any way or give in any way. And, that thing, they say that thing is strong enough to hold a bus. So it sure did its job there. Yeah.
What you have to remember with carbon fiber and any crash structure, the main purpose of a crash structure is not to stop, the impact. It's to slow it down. You look at if a car goes into a barrier head on, there's quite a significant amount of damage in there, and it's absorbing the energy of the impact. If you didn't have a crumple zone in any car, a street car, a single seat racing car, if you just had it could be designed in such a way that you had no crumple zone, and that would do the driver far more damage than this relatively slow deceleration that the crumple zones give you. So I'm sure there's a certain amount that the Halo is designed to give, and also to protect the driver that's bouncing over the top as well. He's got to try and absorb his impact and slow that down as well. So there's all, carbon fiber is designed to deform in a controlled manner. And if you ever get a chance to look at, especially a nose cone at the front of a single seat car without any of the paint on, without any of the finish on, you'll see the carbon fibers laid out in lots of different layers and almost waves around the front of the car, and that is designed to move the energy of the impact around the structure. So I'm sure the Halo is designed in the same way. It's designed to absorb the energy, and there've been some people who've been criticizing the integrity of the Halo and how bits can fly off and injure the drivers. Well, no, sorry, they need to wind their neck in and sort of realize what they're really talking about.
Exactly. So at the end of the day, it was Vettel by 11 seconds over. Yeah. So how what's the point system like, right? So what's the gap now?
I think it's down to 18 points, I believe. I mean, it's less than, I think before Spa, it was a win. I think, Vettel could have won and Hamilton had a DNF, and I think they would have been tied. So I think it's gone down from 25 to 18 points. So it certainly does open it up. Now, you look at Monza next weekend, Ferrari are going to be strong there, and Ferrari now, since probably around about Silverstone, have the fastest car now, without any hesitation. Their engine has surpassed the Mercedes power unit. A lot of people are looking at their energy regeneration system. The FIA have looked at it this year and deemed it legal. And Hamilton made the sort of off-the-cuff comment post-race in Spa about the tricks that Ferrari have got. And they're not illegal tricks. They're tricks that every team has. And, even dare I say, go back to the back markers, Williams, they'll have tricks in their car that no other team has. So every team has these little gimmicks or gizmos or gadgets that can give them a little bit of advantage there. So Mercedes are definitely on the back foot, and where I think they will really struggle is going into Singapore in 3 weeks' time, the first race after Monza, where they've always struggled. You imagine Ferrari will be strong, and you imagine Red Bull will be strong. So, Monza could be a little bit of damage limitation from their end, but Singapore could be a real. You could quite easily see Vettel coming out of that race. If he wins both of those, and Mercedes struggle, then you could easily see Vettel coming out leading the championship post Singapore, which they deserve. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah, it's interesting to see how the complexion of this whole thing has changed so quickly, because we're like the last 2 years is Mercedes, and Ferrari is slowly, slowly bridging that gap there. Now, Ferrari's been every bit as good as Mercedes and better in most cases, although Hamilton's still been piling up the wins. So,
and again, a lot of those have been, as I mentioned.
Exactly, yeah.
Not sort of because he's had the fastest car. Look at some of those races that he's won. They certainly, Hungary, for example, didn't have the fastest car. Germany didn't have the fastest car. So they haven't always been going to script sort of thing, which is always exciting and interesting. But if you're trying to predict what happens, it makes it a lot harder. But going in, to Monza, it's going to be fascinating to see. You expect Ferrari with their new engine and the new upgrades to be strong. I mean, there's one interesting little story which I'll quickly cover that's been doing the rounds on some of the social media and some of the websites. Is that Ferrari have a strategy now that's been going around for a few races, that whenever the car is powered on, and with regards to the electrical system, they place a bag of ice over the camera on top of the rollover hoop. Now, when they were asked about this, they said that, it's to keep the electronics in the camera that sits there. Cool. Okay, fair enough. Well, nobody else has that problem, and nobody else's camera overheats. So there's two sort of schools of thought here. Firstly, it's a complete, what we call a red herring. It's complete, nonsense, and it's just to detract from something else that they're doing, or just purely for the fun of it to get people talking about it. But the other thing is, as soon as the car's powered on, the camera and the FOM system transmits, and they're trying to hide something in the cockpit that the camera could see, which is a possibility.
That's a possibility for sure, but I'm going to tell you the most interesting thing about this story, Richard.
Yep.
That you told it to us last week on the show.
Did I?
Yes.
Well, we can just edit that bit out. That'll be great. Yep.
That's okay. No, it's still a good story, but yeah, it shows to the all the tricks that they do, So and
that's why you leave my section to the end.
Don't feel bad. I just anyway. So Monza next week, or
you hear that Vettel in Belgium? Vettel won at Spa.
Right, I say so. Monza coming up next week. Yep. And you're picking Vettel.
Yep.
No.
I'm going to pick Kimi.
Okay, all right. Christopher Deharde, who would you like to pick for Monza?
Give me a Valtteri.
Okay, you can have him. Seth?
Verstappen.
Okay, and Gray?
Vettel.
I was going to say, wait, there's somebody to pick Vettel, so that leaves me Hamilton. So, but anyway, Monza always a good race. High speed circuit, high commitment circuit. The fact that the fans there are so pro Ferrari, and Ferrari is coming in as the favorite is going to be. It's just going to be amazing. There's always a huge sea of people in Monza, all waving flags and wearing red. So with that being said, Richard, any other Formula One news we need to kind of discuss before we move on and break down this Gateway IndyCar race?
As long as it's news from the last week, no, I don't think so. The driver market's sort of gone a little bit stagnant post summer break. There's rumours that Kimi's going to re-sign with Ferrari for another year, and that could move Charles Leclerc to Haas rather than straight from Sauber to Ferrari. So that's the only sort of murmurings that came out in Spa, which would be a bit of a surprise. But hey, Kimi's must have some photographs of some of that hierarchy there within Ferrari because he keeps signing those 1-year extensions.
Yeah, he's like the thing that wouldn't leave. Yeah. So
Exactly.
anyway, yeah, we like to crack on Kimi, but my gosh, he is a world champion. So you can't take that away from him. So anyway, so Christopher, you spent your weekend in Gateway. Good race down there. Good crowd. Good event. It looked like what did they say? About 35,000 on hand. The whole front stretch was full. They said ticket sales were up from last year. And I thought IndyCar put on a pretty good show, particularly during some of those late stages there where there were some tire degradations and some alternate pit strategies. We saw a lot of position swapping in the middle of the field and towards the front. And there was a genuine pass for the lead with power on Dixon. So, Chris, let's why don't you take us through Gateway a little bit?
There was enough people there where I had trouble getting cell phone signal, which I guess is a good sign. The good news, there seems to be always a need for an improvement at Gateway. Last year, the big complaint was traffic, so they built some new roads around the track to help alleviate that, which had helped. This year, I guess the problem was cell phone signal, so I guess you could say they're going to work on getting more and more towers up next year for cell phone signal. But overall, it was an interesting weekend, interesting race, rather. Ed Jones and Zach Veach providing a lot of the late race entertainment, with Jones absolutely sending it on a couple of moves there, especially around Veach. Rossi giving Dale Jr. another reason why he needs to go commentate on IndyCar with his slide job when Power was going past him there. And then late in the race, when you had the strategies going the way they were, some guys were saving fuel, some guys were going faster because they knew they were going to have to stop. And so you had a kind of a mix where, okay, is he going to stop? Is he going to stay out? And who was going to win? And ultimately, Bull Power was the guy that took it all away and ended up winning at Gateway. Second place was Alexander Rossi. Third place is Scott Dixon. And that result means that Rossi closes the lead in the championship by 3 more points down to where it's just 26 points.
And Will Power is very much alive in his championship as well. Particularly, when you look at the remaining schedule of, Portland and Sonoma, which are 2 tracks that, Will perform well on. This day and age, Will can win just about anywhere. He's such a well-rounded driver. But at this point, with the momentum of winning in Gateway, I wouldn't say that Power's out of this by any stretch of the imagination. We could go into, Sonoma with a tight 3-man battle. Like we did a couple years ago when Dixon jumped up from third and won the championship back in, was it 15?
I think so.
It was 15.
I don't have the stats in front of me.
Yeah, it was in 2015. Yeah, where he was.
It's 15 because Pagano was 16 and Newgarden was 17.
Yes.
Correct? Yeah.
Yes, that is right.
Right. Yeah, that's where Dixon was. Dixon was third going into the finale and won the thing.
Yeah. And with Sonoma being double points and all, it's going to be a little bit crazier with who's going to be able to win the championship, because it's not going to be just 2 or 3 guys, maybe 4 or 5.
Right, yeah. So.
Although one guy that won't be is Sebastian Bourdais, because he crashed out at Gateway on the first lap of the race. He was actually the last driver mathematically eligible that was competing at Gateway. 10 drivers were eligible. He was 10th in points, and crashing out in the first lap is not going to help you win a championship.
No. Bourdais had an up and down season. I hear that there have been, a little discontent behind the scenes. Not much. The people that are saying that sort of thing are probably the people not in the know. But overall, heading into Portland, Sebastian's the last guy to win there. I don't know that the Coyne road course program is as strong as say the Penske's or even Andretti's out there, but
worked at St. Pete.
It worked at St. Pete, yeah, and it hasn't worked since. So, but anyway, yeah. So Bourdais out, and the other thing we were talking about there, right quick, Zach Veach. What a run for this guy again. Looked really strong at Pocono. And he signed to a multi-year deal, so his seat is relatively safe for the next couple of years. So, you see Veach hitting the win column maybe next year, early on, or
I'd say late next year.
Yeah,
I'd say probably around Mid-Ohio sometime because it's his home race.
Yeah, yep, and he just continues to improve week in and week out. And speaking of, excuse me. So speaking of each in the Andretti team, Alexander Rossi, the clutch and coast again, didn't quite get him the win. I was really kind of concerned that that Dixon was going to get him at the end there. So, and then the whole thing could have backfired in his face. So, but it was a tremendous amount of laps that he went without fuel. What was it like? 64 laps?
I don't have the math in front of me, but it was one of the longer stints that I had seen. Also, Firestone with the tires and how they were going, they were able to still run quick lap times near the end there. And I think the other thing was at the marbles, they were still bad, but they weren't as bad as some would think they might be, because Veach told a lot of us on pit road after the race he was able to find a second groove coming off of turn 4. So the rubber that built up out there actually helped him turn the car coming off of 4, and he was able to use that lap after lap to try and get a good run to get some guys heading into turn number 1.
Interesting, yeah. And of course, the save of the day goes to Rossi, who just about lost it on the one. That was a pretty wild move there where he saved it. About the second third of the race. I don't know if you recall that exact moment, but yeah, that was a pretty good save there on Rossi's part. Kept his championship hopes alive. So yeah, this thing is heating up to be a good battle. Portland is coming up. We have 25 cars entered for Portland. 25. That's a great field. That's the biggest field we've had, outside of Indy since I believe St. Pete, and I think St. Pete only had 24. But we've got Junko's car is going to be in there with Alfonso Celis. Carlos Munoz will be back. He will be subbing for Robert Wickens in the number 6 car. Jack Harvey will be running the number 60 car with Schmidt Peterson with Michael Shank. So a good full field at Portland. And speaking of Wickens, Chris, you heard a little news, or we all heard a little news. Little update from his buddy Hinch. Would you care to share that?
Sure. Jeff Gluck tweeted out that he spoke with James Hinchcliffe, and Hinch said that Wickens' first words on seeing him was, "Sick glove, bro," referring to Hinch's glove that he was wearing, compression glove, after his injuries that he sustained in the Pocono crash. So Wickens, clearly did not lose a sense of humor, which is a very, very good sign after the incident, because some drivers, when they get in an incident like that, you wonder how much they've changed. Well, it appears that Wickens hasn't.
Yeah, which is it's good news that he was on a respirator for a while, in an induced coma. Now he's breathing on his own. He's visiting friends and family members. My understanding that Marco flew Hinch out there on his private jet because Marco has a private jet and Hinch doesn't. Flew Hinch out there. They went to visit Wickens and found him in good spirits. But again, not a lot coming out as far as the condition of the spinal injury. So we can only just kind of keep Robert and his family and his friends in our thoughts, and just hope for the best. Realizing that the medical care he's getting is the best available. He's still in Allentown, correct? Or have they haven't transferred to Indianapolis yet? Have they?
Yeah, he's still in Allentown. They haven't moved into Indy yet, but they are hoping they can soon.
Yeah, but he's in good hands in Lehigh Valley Hospital. That's it's a major metropolis area and a very good hospital. So, but our thoughts are with him and Carlos Munoz in the car. That was almost a bit of a surprise. We were talking like we would need a pay driver. I'm not sure if Carlos is bringing money to the table. My guess that he is, but we haven't seen or heard from Carlos since Indianapolis. Where he had a pretty good run. And a lot of folks are just talking about him again. Some folks didn't quite understand why he lost his seat with Foyt when he had a season that was non-spectacular but largely not his fault. So is this a make or break moment for Carlos Munoz if he wants to return to the series, Chris? In your mind?
Sorry, I had a bit of an audio flick out on my end. Could you repeat that?
Is this a make or break moment for Carlos right now, getting another opportunity to come to the car? Yes. Okay.
Yes, absolutely. The thing is with Munoz is that Indianapolis may not have been the race he was hoping for, but getting this chance right here, he's not going for a championship. He's not going for a team. There's no team championship really in IndyCar. It's all about doing what you can with this 2-race splash that you have in order to show people that, hey, you know what? I haven't forgotten how to drive. I'm still a good driver, and I'm capable of bringing a car to the front of the field and doing a good job for Schmidt-Peterson Motorsports. There were several qualified drivers that could have taken that car, but I'm glad to see that Carlos has another shot at it.
Yeah, and the timing is towards the end of the season when folks are starting to think about their lineups for next year. The timing couldn't be better for him to get his face out there, show what he can do here when folks are looking about signing drivers. And speaking about signing drivers, so let's talk a little bit about the Ganassi situation, okay? There's some reports, unconfirmed, that Felix Rosenqvist is slated to take the 10 car off out of Ed Jones's hands next year. Jones says he doesn't know anything to that effect. He has been told he can explore other opportunities, but he's not been told he's out. Jones had a really good run at Gateway, but I know for a fact that Ganassi and his folks are really high on Felix. Felix has tested with the team twice and tested very well. I mean, he was only just a tick off of Dixon's times when they tested, I believe, at Mid-Ohio 2 years ago. So, you hearing anything on this? You hearing any other possibility for Jones if he does lose that ride with Ganassi?
I haven't heard anything yet. The funny thing about Jones is that he mentioned to me after we did an interview for an article post-race, and he said, looking back on it now, I wish I would have made the move on Scott to try and take second place, because at this point Jones is racing for his career. He's not racing for a championship, and that really he should have been more selfish because, with how good of a run that he was having, he could have had a shot at getting a top 3 finish there, but by not going after Scott there, he kind of broke up his momentum, and not necessarily ideal.
It's a double-edged sword there, right? Because part of being the Ganassi driver is to support your teammate or support Scott Dixon, support Scott Des. So you know what I mean. It's you're damned if you do and damned if you don't in that spot right there. Yeah, that's a tough one. But Jones is a good kid. He's got a lot of talent. He's got a future in this series. But the problem is the seats are few and far between. And if you lose a good one, not much left there. But speaking of seats in the series, Yukos is announced they'll expand to 2 cars for next year. This year they ran 11 races with a rotating cast of drivers in 1 car. But they've ordered another chassis. Have had it delivered. So they'll have 2 cars and then 1 spare, and they're looking to run 2 cars every week next year. And he's admitted that they don't have team sponsors. They likely are going to look for pay drivers. They'll likely have a Dale Coyne style rotating cast of drivers in the car, which is it's reality these days. But to see 2 more cars on the grid each and every week instead of just the 11 out of 17 appearances, I think will be good for the team. But it looks like he may drop one of his Indy Lights teams as collateral damage.
I tell you what, I'm thinking that Ricardo Unicos is really, really bullish on this move for next year. I mean, he already announced an IMSA team for next year. He's announced this. I'm really surprised that he's making this move. I hope he's successful with it. But I really hope that they can find a sponsor to kind of give the team a set baseline on getting a setup, getting a notebook built up for the races, instead of having to rely on several different drivers to get data for the car. Now you just have one solid point of reference, and then you can just expand from there. The other thing that I'm worried about is, is he going to expand too much too fast? He's still stepping his toe into the IndyCar waters. Is this too much for him, especially with, like I said, the IMSA program coming about? He's not going to get rid of his Road to Indy deals because that's where he's made, a decent amount of a living over the last few seasons. He's won the last 2 Pro Mazda championships. He's going to have Rinus VK in for Indy Lights. He mentioned that in an interview recently as well, assuming Rinus wins the championship. If you have the availability to make money doing something, you're going to keep doing it, and I guess it's just going to be a case of Ricciardo's going to have to just get some more people to hire to go take care of his equipment. But we'll see how it turns out for him.
Yeah, and I think one of the deciding factors is going to be whether or not another really solid title sponsor comes in with the Mazda Road to Indy to sponsor those scholarship programs that Yugos has been so good at collecting. So
agreed.
So yeah, but take it as it is. We're off to Portland. There's only a handful of guys. It was 2007 was the last time we saw Indy cars at Portland, and that was the Champ Car World Series, the Indy Racing League, which is now the IndyCar Series, has never raced there. So there's a handful of guys that actually have raced at Portland. Dixon and TK raced there in karts. Graham Rahal, Will Power, and Pagenaud have raced there in Champ Car World Series, as did Simon Pagenaud, or as did Sebastian Bourdais, rather, who was the most recent winner there in 2007. And Bourdais as the most recent winner at Portland, and Scott Dixon as the championship leader have been making the rounds in local media in the Portland area, trying to hype up the race. The word on the street from the promoter is that the ticket sales have been brisk, and they're very pleased, looking for a big crowd. Now, this is a race that I used to really enjoy watching. I've always loved the Portland racetrack. One of the most memorable ones for me was the Father's Day one, where Michael runs out of fuel, and his daddy nips him right at the end and takes the win right at the line on Father's Day. That's for me, that's a classic racing moment there, where you couldn't write a better script. But what do you feel like we're going to see coming into Portland? I know they're going to test tomorrow. How do you think the new package is going to work there? I mean, it's hard to tell. There's a lot of unknowns. Obviously, the track is, it's the infrastructure is not as up to date as some of the more modern facilities we see today, although they've done a lot of work there. So, Chris, what are your thoughts about Portland, or anybody else on the panel want to chime in as well?
It's going to be an interesting weekend. I think the package is going to work well at a track like this. We have the hard braking passing zone in turn 1. We have another passing zone heading into the last pair of corners there. It's going to be very, very, very good to see. We are going to have probably a couple of drivers in their race in the turn 1 area with a couple of risky moves. We're going to see probably a couple of fantastic overtaking maneuvers late in the race, unless, of course, someone just nails the setup perfectly and they just go out to lunch on the whole field. I think it's going to be a great, great race.
I think so too, and hopefully it'll stay on the calendar for a while to come. So picking a winner is going to be tough. So Seth, you get the first pick since it's tough, and don't pick Aaron Rodgers. Inside joke, folks.
I'm just gonna go with Scott Dixon.
Okay, good pick. Gray, who do you like for IndyCar coming into Portland?
Will Power.
Good pick. Richard?
Ooh. I think he's going to bounce back in style from the Gateway. Sebastian Bourdais. And for you, Christopher?
Rossi.
Okay. So, I was seriously thinking Rossi myself here, but I'm going to go with then Simon Pagenaud. The guy has not won this year, and he desperately needs a win.
Do you, just briefly on Pagenaud, do you think there's a bit of pressure on him at Penske?
No, he's signed for next year. Penske had...
yeah, well...
I mean, Penske they announced a little while back they're going to keep the same lineup for next year. I mean, there's always pressure on you at Penske. Don't get me wrong. If you're at Penske, there's pressure on you. But and as far as him being pushed out of the ride in favor of somebody else, because I know there was some talk that they were looking at Rossi and they were looking at Wickens. But they did announce recently that they are keeping the lineup intact that they have right now. Which, and why wouldn't you? They've got a pretty solid lineup with Power, Newgarden, and Pagenaud right there. So, but yeah, there's pressure on them. But a win before the season is out would certainly be helpful. You don't want to be the one guy on the Penske team that didn't win.
Sure.
So, all right. With that being said, NASCAR, a couple guys had the weekend off. We had road course races for both of the junior series. Connor Daly made his debut at Road America, but there was some ugly stuff in the news prior to that involving his dad that affected Connor. And just you guys have probably heard this, read this, but to make a long story short, 35 years ago, Derek Daly was doing an interview and used a term that included a racial slur. And the way Derek used it, he used the term to refer to himself. Actually, it was not done out of malice or out of racism, but it was more out of ignorance of the culture of the United States, just coming over from Ireland. Now, 35 years later, this Bob LeMay recounts the incident and gets the story all wrong, gets himself fired. Derek Daly gets fired as collateral damage. Connor Daly, who wasn't even born yet, suddenly finds his sponsorship yanked from Eli Lilly, days before the race. And Eli Lilly has the balls to put in their statement, right? And Eli Lilly is committed to its mission of helping people with diabetes. Well, Connor Daly has type 1 diabetes, right? And so they moved that sponsorship from Connor's car to Ty Majewski's car, who doesn't have diabetes. So how they're helping people with diabetes, I don't know. But the whole thing is, and I'll quote Robin Miller, it's a crock of shit. So anybody else want to chime in on this, you can, because I know we're all really annoyed with this.
Well,
I'll go ahead.
Just one thing. Officially, they didn't actually pull the sponsorship because then they will not have run the 6-car Roush.
Right, but 60, they moved it.
Well, they moved it, but what I was going to say is the number 60 is a Ford Performance development car, so they moved the money around, essentially.
But either way, they did not want to associate themselves with Connor Daly, who was, no matter what his dad said, whether it was right, wrong, indifferent, whether it was in malice or not in malice, Connor had nothing to do with it.
I would argue, if I may, I would argue that first of all, it was Bob Lamy that did it, and he was ousted from the Colts because he told the story in front of an African American coworker. The issue that we have here is of cultural ignorance, and here's what I mean by that. Before 1983, when Derek Daly was a rookie in the Indy cars, at that point, he was a Formula One driver. He had only visited the United States to run at Detroit, Long Beach, Las Vegas, and I think Watkins Glen maybe once or twice, depending on when he went into Formula One. Being in such a bubble as he was at that point, he wasn't able to have himself be fully immersed in American culture by the time May of 1983 rolled around, because he'd only been living in the U.S. for less than 6 months at that point. The other thing is that, as he mentioned in a video, Daly said that phrase was commonly used in Britain, Ireland, and also in Australia at that point, and he had no idea what that word even meant in that statement. And once he learned what it meant, he said, "I haven't said that word in 35 years." It was a case of cultural ignorance, really, and the fact of the matter is that he knows full well that he made a mistake, but not only did he own up to it, learn from it, and quite frankly, it's just an overreaction. And the fact of the matter is that there's a massive loss of nuance here with what took place.
Exactly. And well, the other thing is, Bob LeMay, Or
Lamey.
Lamey, okay, because he's a lame dude. When he recounted the story, right? When he recounted the story, he got the whole thing wrong, or he was attributing a different story to Derek Daly, because what LeMay said was nothing like
Lamey.
Okay, the guy from the guy they used to call the place for the Colts. So Bob Lamey was recounting an entirely different story and getting mixed up and accounting and putting it to Derek Daly. But Daly was the first guy to say, "Hey, this is what happened. Yes, I said this word, and this is the context I said it in." And he said that it was Robin Miller that came and told him, "Hey, look, you can't really use that word in the United States," and he was mortified. Since then, Robin Miller has corroborated that story. And said, yeah, that's absolutely what happened. Robin said he was driving into the Speedway, had the radio on, heard the radio interview, and said, "Oops, I can't believe Derek said that. I'll need to, So, but anyway, but Connor Daly, not even born, totally innocent of anything, but yet they're going to move the sponsorship off his car. So, anyway, that's who else wants to chime in before we get back to talking about racing?
Well, I'm going to kind of segue this into racing. Connor did actually have a decent run in his debut. He was running in the top 10 late in the race until he had a suspension failure. He was actually battling with Catherine Legg, who was in another car, underfunded car, and eventual race winner Justin Allgaier. So,
you know who else had a good race?
Who knows what could have happened?
James Davison.
Yes, he did.
Yes. Anyway, go ahead, Seth. I'm sorry.
Oh, but James Davison, he led one lap, and he was battling with Justin Marks. The two of them got together with about 5 laps to go, giving the lead to Justin Allgaier, who cruised to victory. I mean, it's his 3rd road course win in a row for Allgaier, and it's his 4th win this year. Sorry, 2nd road course win in a row.
Right, because he had one in Mid-Ohio, yeah, so.
Yes.
And again, he snatched the win right at the end. So, right place, right time, took care of his tires, took care of his car. And, actually he was... No, he was leading pretty handily there. It was Davison. Davison messed up trying to catch him. Who David Davison get into at the end?
Justin Marks.
Justin Marks, yeah. I get confused because everyone in the series is named Justin. I kid. But again, Road America, as Spa is the longest and most beautiful road course in Europe, Road America is a very beautiful road course that we have here, and the Xfinity cars put on a great show there. They really do. So I really enjoyed that race.
And also in that race, you had Bill Elliott making what he says is his final NASCAR start. He didn't qualify very well, qualified 20th. He was running top 15 until restart chain reaction, and the day just got worse from there. As he said in an interview post-race, he hit everything except the lottery.
So, Gray, you've been quiet tonight. So, do you get a chance to watch the Xfinity action or the trucks out there in Canada?
I watched the last few laps of the race at Road America. Yeah, I thought Allgaier did a great job. I think when you talked about him winning, he's won 2 of the first 3 road course races in the Xfinity Series. Didn't he also finish 2nd at Watkins Glen?
He did.
Yep. So pretty good track record on the road courses for the year, and he's got one more to go when the Xfinity cars and the Cup cars run the Roval at Charlotte later in the year. So yeah, I'm sure he's got that. That team's got that race circled on their calendar. That will be part of their chase too. Is that correct?
It is.
Okay, so yep. So I'm sure they're looking forward to that. But good race. I really like Road America. I think that's, like you said, Frank. That's a great track. No matter what series runs there, you always see a good show there. And
speaking of the playoffs, the Truck Series started theirs up in Canada at Canadian Tire Motorsports Park. And it was an eventful finish as per usual. Teammates Noah Gragson and Todd Gilliland got together, took Todd Gilliland out of the lead. Gregson spun who's in the playoffs, allowing Justin Haley to take the victory, and it ended up creating a 7-truck pileup that involved their other Kyle Busch Motorsports teammate, Harrison Burton. So all 3 KBM trucks either got damaged or destroyed in that last corner.
Oh, my gosh. So now, young Justin Haley, this was his first career win, is that correct?
Second,
okay, my bad.
He won at Gateway earlier this year.
Okay.
But it was his first road course win in the Truck Series. It's his first playoff win, and he's now locked into the next round of the playoffs. The next race for the Truck Series isn't until Vegas 3 weeks from now. And then after that, it's another couple weeks until the final race of this segment of their playoffs at Talladega.
All right. So, I'm sorry. So the any other Truck and Xfinity news before we begin our preview of Darlington?
Not really. There's some rumors going around that Noah Gragson might be moving up to the Xfinity Series to Junior Motorsports, but he's had no comment, and neither has the team. So, although Dale Jr. did say any driver going to his team needs minimum $5 million worth of sponsorship.
$5 million for Xfinity?
Yes.
Wow.
For a full season.
Wow, they should just bring that. They should bring their money to IndyCar. They got $5 million.
He's got to replace Elliott Sadler in the one main financial thing that they're going to lose.
And possibly Tyler Reddick as well. There's rumors that he's in talks with another team to either move up to Cup or move to another team.
And then also still the rumors persist about the fate of the 78 team. What are you hearing on that, Seth?
The most recent news is that Truex would end up replacing Daniel Suarez, who would be moved to the Levine Family Racing 95 should they actually switch to Toyota, and that the charter would end up being for sale, and that might be where the rumors that GMS was going to buy the team came from, because if they're selling that charter and GMS is looking to move up, they're going to need a charter.
Where does that leave Suarez? I mean, that's a bit of a demotion, really, to go from a mainline Gibbs car to a LFR car. I mean, I don't think he's done that badly.
Well, unless the LFR car is essentially taking Furniture Row's slot.
I know LFR won't have the resources that Furniture Row have. Furniture Row's resources for one car is probably more than some 2 or 3 car Cup teams. So.
Yes, but
if you look at it, you're saying, what has Suarez done wrong? Maybe nothing. But when you have the chance to put Martin Truex on your team, can you imagine? You have Martin Truex and Kyle Busch on the same team. What a formidable lineup! Holy crap!
You throw Denny
Hamlin,
Hamlin in there as well, and young Eric Jones. I mean, you've got the makings of a super team. But let me talk about this. With all those talks, where does that leave? Does that mean that the 78 would dissolve, and then
that's what I've been hearing?
And you've got Cole Pern out there. I guess Cole Pern would be part of the Truex deal, and he would slide on over to the Gibbs program as well. And
the other part of this is all of the Furniture Row equipment as well. It's essentially the shop building, all the cars, all the chassis. That's rumored to what GMS was trying to buy, but for a very discounted price. The other rumor is if Truex gets moved to Gibbs and Suarez to LFR, that equipment, some of it would go to Gibbs and some of it would go to help jumpstart LFR should they go to Toyota.
What do you read into that? I mean, to me, that's quite shocking that do you see that Barney? I know we know Barney's had some health issues, going back to last year. Do you see that him just becoming disillusioned, or he's attained his goals? He started a team. He created a winner, won a championship, and now he's ready to just move on?
I think it's a combination of both, and the reason why is all of this talk started immediately after the announcement that 5 Hour Energy was not going to return.
Yeah, but you would think that a team that was the defending Cup champion could attract a sponsor or a combination of sponsors together to make up for what 5 Hour Energy was putting in, because they had like Bass Pro Shop. I don't know what they were putting in, but they had several other sponsors other than 5 Hour Energy.
Yeah, they had auto owners insurance, right? Yeah.
Yeah, they were involved in that program too.
And Bass Pro Shops.
Bass Pro. I just can't see that one thing, and obviously a big piece of the puzzle, but I can't see what you honestly, in a situation like that, you have got something to sell compared to other teams that have had and enjoyed less success. I mean, I know we're in tough financial times, but I can't believe that they could not come up with one or two sponsors, even if they couldn't, to make up whatever 5 Hour Energy was putting into that program. I just find that quite hard to believe.
Yeah, it's hard to believe that somebody that's already putting money in NASCAR might not want to move their money over to a guaranteed winner. Because you got guys that don't win with sponsors. So they're all.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah,
I
why
can
wouldn't you
understand
just
other teams with a lesser track record having difficulty replacing a sponsor.
Exactly. Yeah.
I can't understand why the 78 group would have trouble. I mean, you don't have to replace it with one sponsor. I'm sure you could get several. I mean, you the way these things work now, you sell the sponsor on a particular number of races, whatever they can afford to buy, and that's what they go on for. Whatever. I don't know what. I'd have to go back and count up how many races 5 Hour Energy was on for this year. But it seems to me that I've seen Bass Pro Shops on that car for quite a number of races this year, and I haven't heard anything about Bass Pro pulling out on them.
Yeah, and then auto owners insurance was on a couple. I know when I was in Kentucky, they had that blue livery on there, and they had the Cabela livery on there once or twice, which is associated with Bass Pro. So yeah,
it's 15 races for 5 Hour Energy, 15 for Bass Pro, and 8 for auto owners. And that includes the All-Star race and the Clash.
Well, I think if you couldn't get somebody to town for all 15, which I find with a team the caliber of the 78 and their track record, I find that hard to believe that they couldn't find somebody to sign on for that for 15 races. Hell, they could sell it 7 and 8, or break it up any way they wanted to. I'm sure It's been years, where people standing in line to get on a car that's going to give them that kind of exposure.
Well, I know there are companies interested. There always are. Whether or not they actually come in is one thing or another. One thing I have actually talked with some people here and there. I won't mention any names, but there are some companies that are interested to come in that can't because of the exclusivity contracts that NASCAR has. So
you mean like you can't bring a Red Bull in because Monster Energy, but 5 Hour Energy was already grandfathered in, just like Verizon couldn't come in when they were running Sprint, which is why Verizon went to the IndyCar series. So what other companies are not allowed in? What other exclusivity is going on?
You have anything that would compete with Xfinity, essentially anything that would compete with Camping World or Gander Outdoors, Monster Energy, and the various NASCAR partner sponsors.
Doesn't Bass Pro Shops and Cabela compete with Camping World?
They're grandfathered in.
Their grandfather.
Okay, all right.
in.
So, and Xfinity, of course, that would take out. You couldn't have DirecTV or
Dish
or Roku or anything like that in there, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So, interesting. But you couldn't have it in the Cup Series because they sponsored the Junior Series. It almost
not quite, because when Nationwide was the sponsor of the Xfinity Series, Geico thought they were going to be grandfathered in on the James Finch car, and they were told that they had to leave to either the Truck Series or the Cup Series because of the contract that Nationwide was signing, the way it was worded. So it depends on the wording of the contracts.
Well, I mean, I know when they sponsored the Nationwide Series, we had Nationwide and Farmers involved in Cup Series.
And Geico moved up to the Cup
Geico,
Series.
yes. We had three insurance companies essentially, associated with the Cup Series at one time. So,
Weren't Nationwide and Farmers both with Hendrick at the same time?
yes, they were.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I believe they were.
Yeah.
They were.
it's a mess.
588, yeah.
Yeah, but I understand if you're putting up the money for a series sponsorship, right? To sponsor the entire series, you should have that because there was no Marlboro car during the Winston Cup, which is why Marlboro was so heavily into IndyCar, which is why
the only other thing that could compete with Winston was smokeless tobacco. That's why you had Skoal and Copenhagen were involved during the Winston Cup days.
Yep.
It really wasn't a direct competitor with Winston.
All right. Well, guys, we got about 4 minutes left of the show, and I do want to leave a little time to talk about going to Darlington. And Gray, I know you're probably getting your bags packed because that's an annual trip for you. So, Gray, why don't you give us a real quick preview of what we might see in Darlington? Then we'll go around and make our picks, and then it'll be just about time to say our goodbyes. So, Gray, the floor is yours.
Well, I'll be attending my 49th consecutive Southern 500, so that goes back a ways. But I'm excited about it. I always enjoy Darlington. Darlington is my favorite racetrack, and enjoy going there. Of course, again, it's Throwback Weekend, which has been wildly successful for NASCAR and for Darlington. They're expecting a big crowd there, and you usually see a pretty good race at Darlington. I still look for the same three guys to be there and be tough. Truex is going to run good there. Harvick's going to run good there. And Kyle Busch is going to run there. In fact, Truex was well on his way to a win last year and had a tire failure late in the race and opened the door for Denny Hamlin to jump in and win his second Southern 500. But I still look for the three, the big three, as we've called them all year. I'll still look for them to be tough there because they've run so well there in the past several years. And, of course, obviously we know what they've done this year. But one thing I was going to say about this throwback thing, I think they're getting a little bit outlandish with it, and they're coming up with some – I know they want to come up and pay tribute to Seth, but I think they're getting away from the original theme that this whole weekend was brought in to be. It was supposed to honor Cup Series cars and things like that from the past. And they're getting in. I think Denny Hamlin's running a color scheme for mini stock car, his late model car from years ago. I think they really need to sit down and talk and rein this back in again and still continue with the throwback, but give the teams a theme that they strictly need to adhere to. And they say maybe next year they say, okay, we're gonna stick to Cup cars from 62 to 64, because I think that's the part that really attracts the fans. They want to see the throwback of the old cars, and I think teams like the Wood Brothers and Petty's do such a great job with their throwback cars. Obviously, they have a lot more history than a lot of these newer teams, and they can always pull a color scheme or a theme from some of their older cars back in the day, and it really resonates, those things really resonate with the fans when they show up there. I think that's one of the things I'm getting a little disappointed with in this throwback. I still enjoy it, but I wish the teams would stick more to a criteria.
Yeah, I think some of that is sponsor driven, but Seth, I'm going to give that to you.
If I made it, at least Denny's looks like his old mini stock car there, at least in the Cup Series. In the Xfinity Series, his Sports Clips car, which is white and red, is a throwback to J.D. Gibbs' green and silver car.
But a lot of these things are obscure, though. How many people know what Denny Hamlin's mini stock car is?
I'm not arguing that.
Oh, no, I know that. You know what I'm saying, though, yes. Seth. I think
we're talking about this same thing in different ways.
Yeah, I'd like to see, personally, for me, a longtime fan, I'd like to see, just for instance, the 22 show up with a lavender car, number 22, and since it's a Ford, like Fireball Roberts' car that he won the 500, I believe, in 63 with. I mean, something like that. That really get the fans excited because you can actually, that is a true throwback when you look at it in that regard.
Well, there are a handful that are true throwbacks. Granted, the numbers are slightly different because NASCAR really doesn't let teams change the numbers.
Right, true.
Like you have Kyle Busch running an Ernie Irvan throwback, the first ever Skills paint scheme there was. Mm-hmm. In the Xfinity Series, some of the smaller teams, especially Carl Long's team, the one that Timmy Hill is driving for, they changed the number, their number 10, to the number 72 because they also run a 72 on occasion and are running a Benny Parsons throwback.
Right. Mm-hmm. Right.
So there are some teams that are creative enough to at least run a proper throwback, and then there are some that, like you said, are just plain outlandish.
Right. They take creative license, and I can understand that. It's what they want to do, and I know a lot of it's sponsoring, but I wish they would say, okay, guys, we're gonna hold this theme, and I'm sure as popular as it is, and as much exposure as this race gets, I mean, this probably is one of the it's probably going to be one of the most well-attended races of the season and get the most exposure. I mean, the sponsors really need to jump in on this and help with it rather than demand they have to stick to their thing too, because it's a win-win for everybody.
Also, to my knowledge, there's two teams that are not running throwbacks this year. Daniel Suarez in number 19 and Alex Bowman in the 88.
And I can understand that's surely their prerogative, but I think if you're going to do a throwback weekend, I think, basically we're talking about the history and heritage of the Southern 500, and some of these throwbacks have nothing to do with it.
I agree. Anyway, so guys, we're in overtime, so we need a green-white checker right here. So let's go around with picks. Chris, I'll give you the first pick for the NASCAR race. Okay, Chris. Richard, I'll give you the first pick for the NASCAR race.
Kyle Larson.
All right. Gray?
Oh, I'm going to go with Harvick.
Seth?
Kyle Busch.
All right. Chris, one more time. You there?
Oh, yeah, Brad Keselowski.
Brad Keselowski. Because that leaves me, Denny Hamlin. No. I'm going to take Martin Truex Jr. That being said, guys, we'll talk to y'all in a week. I want to thank the Hoobazoo Radio Network. I want to thank iHeartRadio. I want to thank you, Gray, Richard, Seth, and Christopher. Appreciate you guys being on. And to you folks that tune in and listen, we'll talk to y'all next week. Good night.
WHOOBAZOO, that's Hoobazoo.com.
Enter website, enter website, enter website, enter website.